What's up, everybody? Jay Doza back again with some more Fab content. Kind of doing that two-pronged approach here with the Fab and the Legends of Runeterra. Finally back to making some Runeterra content. It's been a long time coming, and I am super excited to get back into some Icelander action here, going up against the one and only Dash, the deck of choice usually for Ruffhouseplays. So, again, using Talishar, otherwise known as Flesh and Blood Online here. Link below in the description if you guys want to check that out. It is the way, in my opinion, the premier way to play Flesh and Blood Online when you don't have somebody close by you can actually meet up with and play. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the game. Don't forget to check me out on Twitch, by the way. I do stream Flesh and Blood, usually with Ruffhouse as well. But let's go ahead and get into the video. Alright, so here we go. We have Icelander versus Dash here. So, generally speaking, and I'm not going to lie, I've played against Ruffhouse versus his Dash deck a million times. Usually with Dory, because Dory was kind of the hero that I started with. But I've been having this little foray into Icelander for a while now. And generally speaking, in my opinion, this matchup, the problem is you need to stave off any early aggression, generally, right? So you can see here they do not actually have the Teklo Pounder. He's going with a little bit of a different strategy here with the mainline. So if anybody not familiar with mainline, basically whenever you play something that gets a counter like a Teklo Core or a Pounder, it just gets another counter put onto it and it takes off of the mainline. So that's pretty cool. You can see actually, by the way, first turn I just Arsenal past there because there's really no sense in me taking any cards out of his hand because they do have Arcane Barrier, and they're just going to draw back up anyways. I didn't want to waste that Ether Ice Vein red there. So speaking of Ether Ice Vein, all right, because this is not a super early aggressive deck, because there's no Teklo Pounder, it's going to be a little bit easier for me to kind of go with my with the game plan that I want here. And Ruffhouse has been testing out different strategies with Dash. So it doesn't surprise me that Icelander had a pretty easy time in this particular matchup. So due to not having much aggression, I can actually be the aggressor here. So this Icelander list is that Bullander list that you've probably heard of, playing E-Strikes and Wounded Bull and stuff like that. Fiendel's Fighting Spirit, and then also Scar for Scar to swing in with those attacks as well as the arcane damage. So I actually kind of felt like, for the most part, I was putting Ruffhouse on his back feet thanks to that early Ether Ice Vein. And honestly, looking back on it and voicing this over after the fact, I think that red Ether Ice Vein from the very beginning of the game is actually what allowed me to continue just the momentum every single turn, right? So we had the Ether Ice Vein on our first attack. Now it looks like we're going into a Wounded Bull turn. And actually another Ether Ice Vein turn, which, oh wow, if I'm not mistaken, I don't remember this entirely. So Ruffhouse has 3 Arcane Barrier. Oh, okay, I thought I was going to go, I guess I don't have Go again. Ether Ice Vein, I think I technically could have, if I had Go again, play Ether Ice Vein and Wounded Bull, but so it looks like I just went with the Wounded Bull, and I'm going to go ahead and Arsenal the Frost X here. So the interesting thing with this deck is when you're doing things like playing Wounded Bull and attacking and being the aggressor and playing the Ether Ice Veins, I don't think you're nearly as worried about setting up something like Frost Axe. Now, doesn't mean it'll hurt, which I'm curious to see if I do activate this here, because why not at this point? And technically, because it's an ice spell, Ruffhouse would take 1 damage if I activated it from Arsenal here because of Icelander's effect. I'm not totally worried about setting up Frost Axe, but it's never necessarily a bad thing to do, right? Because typically in Icelander matchups, you are slowly but surely putting together kind of that one-turn kill. So you set up a Frost Axe early on, maybe you get a second one out later on, then you start getting Amulets of Ice down, then you start getting some E-Pots, and you slowly stack up all those items there, Insidious Chill, right? And then eventually just go for that one big swing. I didn't play the Frost Axe, so don't be me. I remember, I don't know why I was waiting to play it, but I remember thinking in my head during this game, now that I think back to it, that it was an absolute mistake not playing that Frost Axe the turn that I didn't play it. I'll see here if we play it the next turn, because I'm kind of thinking of a different game that was paired with this. because we played a few games, Icelander versus Dash when this happened. But really, there's no reason to not play a Frostex if you get a chance to play a Frostex, because the problem then becomes it just ends up sitting in Arsenal like you see here. So basically, even though I was able to get an Ether Ice Vein down, which continues to give me a little bit of tempo here versus this Dash in this matchup, I am not drawing up a full 4-card hand, which feels bad. I'm just not utilizing my resources the way I should be utilizing them. And if you notice, I still haven't even used Fiendel Spring Tunic. So 2 things to really note there is, A, try to always be using your arsenal generally as Icelander. And B, try to make the most value out of your Fiendel Spring Tunic. So it's one thing that I'm learning a lot lately, specifically in Icelander. When you're doing things like trying to attack with Waning Moon on your opponent's turn, if you play a blue from Arsenal, and you have a red pitch in hand, you should pair the red pitch with the Fiendel's Tunic to shoot off the Waning Moon, right? Different things like that. So you got to try to think of those resource point curves ahead of time. I almost said mana curves. So that you can successfully use a Tunic. So it looks like I did do that here, finally getting it off on turn 4. So this is not one of those games where I screwed up not using it too long. I think I went into a game turn 7 at one point. I didn't use the Tunic, which felt really crappy. But we did get the Frostex down as well, so I didn't wait for it too long there, which is good. They're going to take the damage from the Frostbite, it looks like, or from the from the Frostbite. Now we have an E-Strike and Insidious Chill. So I think what I am kind of considering here is, do I just E-Strike and draw a card and, set the card hoping that it's a blue? I mean, there is a pretty good shot that I get a blue card. Or do I set the Insidious Chill and keep the E-Strike in hand, which is kind of a not great use of resources. So I do go ahead and just pop the E-Strike with the draw card. This is why E-Strike is so freaking good in this deck, because it's so versatile. You can get an E-Strike into a Go Again, into like a Wounded Bull or something like that, or an Ether Ice Vein, which feels really, really good on a full 4-card hand. Because generally you will need a 4 or 5-card hand to pull that off. Or you can even E-Strike into draw a card and do exactly what we're doing here. Or you just end the turn with a giant E-Strike attack. So really good. Or actually, another thing that I've found myself doing a lot too is E-Strike Go Again into Coronet Peak, which we haven't even seen used this game. So just something else to think about. Coronet Peak is more of a defensive tool when you're kind of on the back foot. And as you can see this game, 31 to 23 right now, we're not really on the back foot much. So T-Bone coming in from Ruffhouse. So for anybody new, T-Bone seems good, but not nearly as good as you think, because you can toss equipment in front of it that does not blade break or lose counters or anything like that. So like we have Stormstriders. Stormstriders does not break, does not temper or anything like that. Actually does not even have a defense value. However, you can still throw it in front of cards like T-Bone. To fulfill the requirement for using an equipment. So just something to think about. We were able to get the Waning Moon off this turn. We have the Ice Bolt. So things are looking pretty good. Things are looking up for us. The one thing that I'm surprised with versus Ruffhouse in this matchup is the amount of resource points he actually had. I think he was able to pitch and prevent the max amount of arcane damage that he could every time I shot off arcane damage, even not having blues, because he had things like the Hyperdriver, because he had, it looks like 2 Techlo cores now. Like, he's starting off turns with so many resource points. It was just crazy how much damage he was actually able to prevent. And then eventually come back and I think in a couple turns here, we'll see actually come back in the game and start getting a little bit of tempo back. So Fiendel's Fighting Spirit, another fantastic card. So the versatility with this, with blocking, is pretty cool too. You can see we actually passed there and just arsenaled the E-Pot. I did that because Fiendel's Tunic would not get the pump from the having less life, so it would have only been 7 attack or sorry, not pump, the life gain, right? It heals you 1 if you have less life. I don't know if that was necessarily the right play. The problem with Icelander is it almost always feels incorrect to not arsenal a blue card. I don't know why, especially something like E-Pot is not even an ice card, which feels bad. So we decided to do the E-Pot. I do think we play it here, and now that we're below our opponent's life total, this is why we're deciding to trigger it, because we are now going to be able to, I think we Waning Moon here and pitch the Heart of Fiendel. So Heart of Fiendel so good in this deck. It's not required for anybody wanting to play this deck. I know it's an expensive card. It's also an amazing card. It's definitely not required, but it does help, especially with the theme of the deck where most of the cards trigger on having less life than your opponent, and you can very easily work yourself to have less life in most scenarios without being like, dead or anything like that, or on the threat of lethal. So again here, 4 damage, putting me right below their life total. Huge, huge, huge here. The problem is max velocity. So this is where this becomes a game. Ruffhouse was able to put together a max velocity turn. This is what you have to look out for versus Dash. Those max velocities are incredibly important. That's why you're usually looking for them to banish them off the top with boost. So always, always, always check their graveyard to see what's been banished. I cannot tell you enough in Dash matchups how important it is to just know what cards they've already been through. I decided to go with the Gauntlet here again to be resource point efficient. So we had the 1 left over from the Heart. We decided to use the Gauntlet, take a little bit less damage, but we do go really, really low here. And we did it because we have a pretty nice turn to set up. Scar for Scar into Fiendels to also gain a life. So Ether Ice Vein was pitched for this. One thing I want to mention here is Blue Ether Ice Vein. When your opponent has Arcane Barrier 3 and you are Icelander, you are probably not going to play the Blue Ether Ice Vein because they will just pitch to prevent it so that they can save the card in hand. If they have a blue, then you're screwed. If they don't have a blue, then it kind of works out because they're going to have to pitch 2 cards anyways to prevent it and or, from the damage. So they'll probably just take the damage and then just discard 1 card anyways or pitch 1. So you never, never, ever want to play that. So I think I've already gone through all 3 in my deck. They've probably been pitched to things at that point. So now we get to turn 8. So I don't know if this is the turn that I played Eep. Is this the weird turn? I feel like this is the weird turn where I did a weird play. I think I do go again. Yeah. So Enlightened Strike with the go again. I think the thing that I am trying to do here is go in for the Wounded Bull on top of that, thinking that Ruffhouse would block something. He did not. He just took the whole thing. Now I don't get the 1 extra attack. I think I had made a comment to him too that I kind of screwed up the calculation. I didn't necessarily screw it up. I just wasn't expecting him to not block there and take all the damage. So I miss out on 1 point of damage. It is what it is. But worth it, in my opinion, to use the extra 2 resource points that we had, plus the Fiendel's Tunic to get this attack off. And then on top of that, also set a Channel Lake Frigid. So now this, at this point, this is where I told Ruffhouse he done fucked up. When you are playing against Icelander, there's a time to take damage to kind of mount a comeback in any matchup. If you take damage using your life as a resource to then mount a comeback and get tempo back, because then you have a full hand and you can hopefully swing the tempo back in your favor. You cannot go below probably like 6 life versus Icelander. If you go to 5 or anything below 5, you are probably going to lose to something like this. And the reason for that is Stormstriders. The second, as an Icelander player, the second that I see my opponent go down to something like 3 life, I am instantly thinking, how do I kill you? Like, it's just, that's how it is. Now, with Arcane Barrier 3, it's better for somebody with Arcane Barrier 3. Like, there is a chance they could survive. Arcane Barrier 2, definitely dead. Arcane Barrier 3, if they have a lot of blues, at least, like, I think if he had at least, like, 2 blues here, he would have survived. But, yeah, that's a yellow. I don't think he had a blue, if I remember the conversation after the game. And on top of that, we had the Channel Lake Frigid. The Channel Lake Frigid also adds another another Frostbite token there to deal the additional damage. Unable to prevent that 3 at the end of the game. Actually overkilled him by 1. But that is the power of Stormstriders at the end of a game as Icelander.